We're here today with Joe Foster from Edelweiss, and he's going to give us some best practice rundowns on how to use Edelweiss for our businesses. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Ann. It's good to see everybody, or at least your avatars. I have two screens going here, so if I'm looking off to the side, that's why. So basically today, we're going to be talking about this. Hold on, let me get this up. My transitions are inevitably poor when I'm doing these. Basically, when I was first approached about doing a session, it was pretty much all about kind of working analytics into your daily sort of schedule. And I do get this question a fair amount. Like someone say, hey, can you call me and tell me how to use like analytics? And that's just, it's a big question. And so I always try to suggest to people that we, instead of doing that and like going in and, learning how to make soup, let's learn how to chop onions first, I guess. I just came up with that analogy. I'm not sure it's a strong one, but I'm going to go with it. So just to give, if you're not familiar, we have two subscription levels for analytics. There's Summit and Basecamp. And the Basecamp essentially will show you your comparable title. It'll show your point of sale data and the comparable titles within an Edelweiss title listing. So basically it's a way to speed up the buying process, and it'll show you, the first 3 months of sales history, also the first 3 months of average inventory, lifetime sales, last year's sales, current on hand, current on order, all that kind of stuff. The whole idea there is that a conscientious buyer is going to look that stuff up anyways. And so having it right there in Edelweiss makes it a lot faster. There is a special right now. Well, it's been for a couple of years now, I think. Both Random House and Hachette are offering or working with us to offer Basecamp for free for a year for newly subscribing stores. So they like to see you on analytics so that they can represent you better, essentially is what it comes down to. But they also, you being on analytics feeds into the aggregate data and helps them, do better with print runs and that sort of fun stuff. The Summit is really the core of what we do. It's really where we started. Before Edelweiss existed, we were above the tree line analytics. It's all built into Edelweiss Plus now. I don't like saying Edelweiss Plus. I just like saying Edelweiss. So I'm just going to do that. But there's just a whole bunch of different tools in there, and we are going to talk a little bit about each one of those today and kind of how they work into a schedule sort of situation. With the whole chopping the onions thing that I'm essentially married to now. I always like to recommend to, rather than coming in and like opening analytics and say, I'm going to use all these things today. It's better to go in with a specific task in mind, whether that's, doing returns in graphic novels or beefing up kids' board books, or, seeing where you're weak in certain areas of the store, that sort of thing. It's like having a targeted sort of idea of what you want to do just makes a lot more sense. And that, that's with any tool. You pick up a screwdriver, you don't just go start unscrewing everything. You have a specific thing to unscrew. Just the metaphors today are just going to be bad. Sorry. So I do have a document that lists all these sorts of things that I can show you guys where to find it. But essentially, I'm going to break things down into what I would recommend as someone who used analytics as a buyer, and then has the experience that I've gained over the last number of years teaching people how to use analytics and that sort of thing. And hearing best practices from people and that sort of thing. There's really not something that you need to do every single day in analytics. So that's not really like a thing. But I always hear from people that they like to, have the analytics stuff open all the time, which essentially now is having Edelweiss open. And, you come across a title, or you go and shelve something in history, like that seems full to me. I'm going to go check it out and see, how that's doing. And it just kind of like allows you to combine what you're seeing and kind of the anecdotal thing, combine that with the raw data of what's happening in your store. And like I say here, you combine those two things and you get unstoppable. Weekly wise, I always like to suggest using the most popular titles. So that essentially within Edelweiss, there are two pockets. Or within the analytics, there's two pockets. So there's like the market analysis stuff, and that's going to be the market top sellers and the top not yet released. And that's where the entire marketplace, which in this instance, the marketplace is other stores who use analytics, which I like to say it's all the best stores. No offense if you're not on, but there are a lot of stores, and they're all throwing data in here. And you can see, for example, like what are the most popular titles among, Northern California stores, for example. Or you can see for the entire region, you can see libraries at this point even, or UK stores, because those markets are on analytics now as well, which is less useful. Let's be clear on that. But you can see not only like what's selling well around the market, but also how you're positioned with those titles. So, one title might be selling well everywhere and you just cannot move it. And maybe it's because it's not for your store. It's not something that your customers are interested in, or maybe you don't have it displayed correctly, or you're not being as aggressive with it as it deserves. But it just gives you that extra level of information that you wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. With the caveat too, and I always really like to stress this, that we very much view the analytics tools as a descriptive rather than a prescriptive service. So we are not telling you what to stock, we're telling you what's happening, basically, and you can make your own more informed decisions based on that information. And I say that essentially because every single time I do a training for a store, people always stress how unique their store is, which is not untrue, but it's also untrue in a way, because everybody's buying their books from the same places, right? There are those, the local stuff, or the, if you're a used store, things are going to be completely different, but, in your sidelines and that sort of thing. But like the mix of books is where the uniqueness comes in. To a certain point, like every store is a special snowflake and ... So keep that in mind. So that was the weekly stuff, just checking like what's hot, what you're out of, what you might be missing. Monthly, I always like to recommend using the top not yet released titles, which is essentially a way to crowdsource your front list buying. So you can see, the most ordered titles among your peers and see what you might have missed, which could be any combination of things, whether that's it was a drop-in title that you missed, or it could be something that you thought looked stupid and you don't want to bring it in, totally legit. But if everybody else loves it, maybe it's getting attention elsewhere that you missed, who knows? But again, that extra level of information that you didn't have previously, and you can make more educated decisions on that. I don't know that I've ever made a poorer decision based on having more information. Maybe I have, but I don't have it. I don't have that data. What I always recommend as well, looking at the historical overview, which is, we'll get into what all is in there. It's just a good way to get like a snapshot of how either your entire store or a chunk of your store is performing. And then quarterly, I always recommend doing some stock analysis action and seeing basically what should go away is what it comes down to. Somebody asked me at a party one time what I do for a living, which is always a weird question for tree line people. But I jokingly said that I would try to convince people to take advantage of one of the dumbest loopholes in retail, which is the ability to return unsold stock. Like it's ridiculous that that exists, and it's also crucial for the book business that that exists. But if you're not taking advantage of that, you're missing out on a significant advantage. So essentially, I always recommend using the stock analysis to make sure that you're doing regular returns on a regular schedule. And then I really love the category performance comparison graph. It's the weirdest graph on the site, but it's also, it's probably the most likely to serve as a black hole for your attention, because you can really like dig deep into your inventory. But it's nice to do that on a semi-regular basis. And then again, yearly, doing the stock analysis thing again, and either a catalog analysis or an analytics view of a previous order. You know, if you're doing a Penguin Children's fall order, it makes sense to check out how your order did with Penguin Children's last year or even the year before, and just kind of like gauge your success with those buys, which not everybody likes to see. Basically, if you did great and you sold everything that you bought, then you're going to love looking at it, but otherwise maybe not so much. So again, so I didn't want to hop back and forth between PowerPoint and the website to show you those things. So we're going to now bump over into me showing you a little bit about how to use those tools in a more scheduled sort of way. But again, if you don't have analytics and you're interested, email sales@abovethetreeline.com and I'll get back with you, or if you have questions, that sort of thing. So I'm going to work back through the daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly stuff and try to get back up here. Here we go. Okay, so one thing that people tend to miss is, let's do this one, the ability to turn on analytics data while you're looking at specific titles. And so this is what a lot of people do to kind of gauge how they're positioned on a title pretty quickly and stuff. So if you go into other actions, and again, this is if you're on Summit, one of the other options is analytics data, and that turns that green bar on and off. So you can look up a title and see, you know, the hardcover for Where the Crawdad's Seeing, etc., has very strong numbers, and you can see how you're positioned on it. The store has 11 in stock. This is a demo store that we're going to be looking at. It has odd data because it's a conglomeration of different stores, just so you know. So that's a nice clean way to look at stuff. You can also bump in here and see more of the trend sort of thing. You know, for this particular store, lifetime sales, when was the last time you sold anything, that sort of stuff. So like here, the maroon is on hand and the blue are sales. And you can do that for any title that you find in Edelweiss. And also within the analytics page, you can find more of an analytics search, which actually searches, rather than the Edelweiss database, it searches the analytics database, which are different because of the those unique items that aren't going to be cataloged elsewhere. But you can search in here as well. So again, the daily thing, not really any specific task that I would recommend diving into every single day. That's a bit much. That being said, when I was a buyer, I would look at analytics with my coffee in the morning before I started doing my restocking buys, just to kind of like set my head where it needed to be. You know, things, you know, I would look at this stuff. If things were trending upwards in the inventory, sales were not looking so hot, turns were going down, that kind of thing, then I would not buy as aggressively. It was just like, you know, getting my head right for the day. So that being said, that's daily stuff. As far as the weekly stuff, what I really recommend is diving into the most popular titles here. And I always like to set this to usually 2 months back. You can do current month. The current month is this month. So we're talking September. Well, it's actually, the data is a day old, so it'd be all of August. But I'd go 2 months back, usually just a couple hundred titles. Don't need to get all crazy. And then that'll reset here in a sec. So essentially what we're looking at here is the top 200 selling titles around the marketplace. And it's not the top 200 in sheer number of sales, like quantity sales. It's also the number of stores who have sold it. So, one store selling 1,500 copies of a particular book every day doesn't throw off the whole graph. But what I'm looking for here is not in the green. The green are titles that you're doing great with. If you want to look through those, great. But if you're on a time crunch, which you are, I know, then I would ignore that. I would ignore these guys, and I would look here real quick. Hopefully that's small. And these are, the blue here are stale/cool titles. So these are going to be titles that have been sitting on the shelf without moving for a long time. And keep in mind that these are also titles that are doing great elsewhere. So, did this title die? Is it missing somewhere? This is sometimes you go look on the shelf and you're like, okay, that title was stolen or was creatively shelved by somebody who took it to the bathroom or whatever kind of fun stuff you get to deal with on a daily basis. That being said, these are titles that are doing great everywhere except your store. So worth taking a look at. And always also look at the red. So titles that you do not have, which hopefully, people say, they'll say, I only have a couple that are missing from this. Is that good? And it's not good or bad. It's just that you don't have these titles. And is that whether or not that's good or bad is whether or not you can sell those titles, right? Like if it's a title that you forgot to reorder, then yeah, it's bad. Then you should reorder it. I always like to also look at the yellow titles here, which are titles that are on order. Definitely worth checking if you don't remember the last time you ordered the bluest eye, but it's showing as on order. Go take a look at your point of sale system and see what's going on. It's usually super easy when it's just a few books. And the way you check, you know how your point of sale system works, but just pop in, copy and paste the ISBN and pop it into your point of sale system. Anyway, so again, if you're looking at titles that you're missing, you can throw those on an order from here if you like, or again, you can pop them into your point of sale system and put them on a PO there. Kind of depends on how you like to work. So that's a thing that I would do on a weekly basis. For me, it was generally speaking, like Wednesday morning, knowing that it would take Ingram 2 days to get my reorders, so I'd be stocked up before the weekend. But again, it really depends on how you like to work. For monthly stuff, I really liked using the top not yet released titles a couple weeks before the next month. So, mid-September, look at October releases, and you can do that within here. Set the pub date for 10/1, include an upper bound. So right now it's anything published after October 1st. If you include an upper bound, then it's going to be within the range that you select here. And so this is going to show you of all the titles that are published in October, what are you missing? The yellow are going to be titles that you do have on order. The red are titles that you don't. So you could scroll through here pretty quickly, or you can view titles in grid and scroll downward essentially. But when you look at the grid, you also get numbers, what percentage of stores have stuff on order and what sort of quantities are we looking at. Yeah, so for me, it makes sense because there is a visual aspect here. It makes sense to dive through and just look at the covers. Like, do I recognize this? Did I miss it? Is it something that I can sell? If not, don't sweat it. Again, I really like to stress that if If you just can't sell Jan Brett, then maybe don't don't bring that one in. I don't mean to pick on Jan Brett. She's amazing. So again, right now we're looking at the entire ecosystem of titles that come out in October. You can do categories, of course, or if you want to do specific groups of categories or something like that, you can create, a save filter and look at only kids books that are coming out. If you're the kids buyer, obviously that makes sense, or whatever kind of categories that you specialize in, that sort of thing. For me, timing wise, I want to look at everything, see the top ones that are coming, and then move on to the next task. And also monthly, I like looking at this, the historical overview. So saying looking at the historical overview is a bit of a misnomer because there's a number of graphs in here. And it's, it doesn't have to be something that happens on a regular sort of basis. It can be, or on a scheduled basis. You can look at it whenever you want, of course. Been looking around a bit, and I see this on most stores. That's a tough time. But you can see, within the last 12 months, take a look at that annualized turn number. That's your kind of your report card at a glance. For this particular store, 1.4, not amazing, and it's somewhat because of this dip, but also they're just a little overstocked on things. We are looking at the entire store, so the share of total store is going to be 0. But if you look at a particular category, you look at fiction. Generally, what I see, look at fiction, and it's going to be, I'll just look at fiction. I don't have to guess. It's usually like stock is 25% and sales are 40% or something like that for a fiction section. Just kind of a cool number to see, I think. There's also a unit sales in there. But again, what I'm really looking at here on a pretty regular basis is just looking at that turn number. I just want to see the things are trending to the positive, if that makes sense. So that's the monthly stuff. Quarterly stock analysis, and this is where I get on my soapbox a little bit about refresh here, about the return thing. The way that I worked returns at Maria's, where I worked, was that we returned a quarter of the store every month. And so, every month we did one section of the store, one quadrant, and then, the next month you go on to the next section of the store and just keep doing that. Don't do it in December, right? Because that's insane. And that's where our local stuff was in the rotation. But I liked that the aggressiveness of having that regular of a return schedule, and as a consequence, the first time we did that, it was brutal. We returned a lot of the store, made the owner of the store cry. It was sparse in there, but then of course the great truth of book selling is that the books never stop coming, right? But then after that, things got tighter and tighter and tighter, and the inventory got more and more svelte. And as a consequence, the stale portion of the inventory at that store was tiny, like 2%. Just local author stuff, essentially. Most stores, the average that I see for most stores is 20-25%, which to me feels brutally heavy. A quarter of the store hasn't moved in a year, essentially, is kind of what that means, which is painful to see, I think. But you just keep trucking, keep doing your thing. If you do have your store set up into quadrants, you can create a saved filter based on those, the point of sale categories that are within that section of your store. And you click into that and you can create a spreadsheet super easy from that. Whether or not you do it that way or you do it by sight, which some people do, that's fine too. Just do it, especially now. I think most people did a decent amount of returns once the pandemic hit. Yeah, so do that. And again, do it on a schedule and not just like, I can't shelve in history anymore, so we should do a return in history. That's an inefficient way to do it. And I also, again, so I talked about the category performance comparison being my favorite graph, and that's this funky looking guy. The reason I like it is because you can see deeply. You can look very deeply into your inventory. Specifically, if you're using BISAC here, so you have the option of using BISAC, point of sale categories, age, that sort of thing. If you're using BISAC, because it is a striated sort of categorization system, you can, for example, look into cooking and say, that creates a temporary filter up here, and you can see, which type of cooking books you do the best with or the worst with, and it's all striated according to. I got striated stuck in my. But you can see what you do the best with, and then as you continue looking, you can say, show me history of food and cooking, and you can dive into that even a little bit deeper. And what's cool about that, again, it sets up a temporary filter, but what that does is it produces that filter elsewhere on the page. So as you're diving into cooking, you can just kind of click back and forth and find, okay, I'm missing these books in this category, and I could return these books. And you can kind of do like a swap out, like get rid of the Schleck, which might be fantastic books. I'm not making any judgment calls on there, aside from the fact that your customers don't want to buy it. And then replace it with stuff that they may be more likely to buy. Just a nice way to keep things balanced and fresh. I always like to be surprised when I walk into a bookstore, especially a bookstore that I frequent on a regular basis. If I'm not surprised, I get bored and maybe don't go back as much. To clear out that filter, you go here. And again, you can also do your point of sale system or your point of sale categories within there. But I really do like, you're looking at your mystery titles and break it down. Like, you sell hard-boiled titles this well, and cozy mysteries this well, that sort of thing. Again, that's where the rabbit hole can really come into play there. Now we're to the yearly stuff. So basically there again, looking at the stock analysis and looking at that turns number and seeing trends. This is a unique year, so things get a little off with the trend. Hopefully that trend never duplicates again. But if you have a sales trend that's pretty consistent year to year, 1 month it's always a little bit higher than the rest. There's December, of course, but then elsewhere throughout the year, does your inventory match that, and does your buying match that, and are you cognizant that is actually happening? Just essentially like tracking your buying. It's a report card, whether you like looking at your report cards or not. And then within the analytics view, I'm going to see if this odd test account has any older orders here. A bunch of testy things. Summer 12. I went deep. Here we go. Just grab this guy. So again, if you are on Summit Analytics, you have this green bar thing, but you can also view an order or a catalog or a filtered list of titles or what have you, according to your analytics view. And you can segment this according to turns or shelf days. And then shelf days is measurement used within the analytics tools to kind of provide a longevity and a trajectory sort of measurement on some titles. So again, we can see, within this order, how did it do? Do we still have these titles? Are they still performing? That sort of thing. If you look at an order that's a year old, you get a pretty decent view of what happened with that particular order. And that is, I have that in the yearly category, but really that I would say that's a seasonal sort of thing, depending on the order and the publisher that you're looking at. And that is really the meat of it. I want to move this over. So again, I really, really like to stress that it makes more sense to dive in and have a specific task in mind, whether it's a regular task or a situational sort of thing that just came up, just to keep you honest, I guess. There's a few questions in the chat here that I'm gonna take a peek at here. One of the questions is, where does the green data come from when you're looking at a catalog? And that is the same sort of percentage. I should have clicked into a thing first, sorry. It's the same sort of percentages that you see in the title grids in here. So it's going to be market performance, depending on the market that you've selected. So it's going to be sold percentage, stocked percentage, and ordered percentage. So if we look at a catalog, I will bump into one. So usually when you're looking at front list stuff, you're going to see an on order percentage here, and that's going to be kind of depending, of course, on where when you buy, right? Like if you're the first person to look at a catalog, everything's going to be zeros for the most part there. Some people very, very much depend on this for their front list buying, and they wait till the last minute to go through a catalog. Not my preferred method of buying, but it is a thing that a number of people do. But if you're looking at backlist stuff and that sort of thing, you'll see some good numbers in there. And then mostly used bookstores, does category performance help? I'm assuming yes, if you're looking not at titles, but at BIZAC. We have a ton of used bookstores that use the analytics tools. It is a different sort of thing. Obviously you buy differently for a used bookstore. But I would say the most relevant thing is, you can tell your used book buyer, let's take a little rest on the travel books for a while, right? Like if things are just overstocked, generally the way I look at this particular graph is like buyer interest versus store interest in a way. That's simplifying things quite a bit, but like if the buyer has this idea that they sell the hell out of travel books and they don't actually, then that's going to just be in the red. And that's just kind of how it goes, essentially. I'd like to open this as well. So, if something is overstocked and is always overstocked, it doesn't have to be, you just change the way that you buy a little bit, do some returns, get rid of stuff that nobody wants to buy, and kind of react according to that extra level of information. I keep stressing that, like it's just one of those things. It's an information game, because when we're looking, especially looking at front list, it's kind of the it's like low stakes gambling, right? Like we don't know how a book is going to do. We can guess, and we can guess according to, you're buying James Patterson. How do you sell James Patterson? Like that's an easy-ish one. But when you start looking at debut authors and stuff like that, you don't know. So I feel I just totally lost my train of thought. But like keeping things in mind as you're buying, with your performance in specific sections and that sort of thing can be immensely helpful. Right, I think I finished that thought. And I think that's all the questions that we have for now. If anybody else has anything, we can skip the chat and just talk here if we want. Nope.
I know that buying can be such an emotional thing in our attachments to books. I mean, it's really hard to return them, especially if you really believed in, and somehow you ended up selling something else instead, which happens sometimes. So to me, what this does is it either validates your, it has data to back up. It provides data to back up what your decisions are, and it doesn't mean that the emotion still isn't there, because sometimes it still is kind of sad. Sometimes it's really happy too, though. But
Yeah.
it kind of backs up your view with data, whatever is happening in the store with data, so you can respond. Your business can respond in a logical way.
Yeah, and I personally have weird reading taste, weird in comparison to most people, I think. And so I would buy stuff for the store that I dug, and just stuff that I wanted to see sell, but that didn't mean it was going to sell. I would try, and there's sometimes you just cannot sell a book, and that's just how it goes. I would return my favorite book on a semi-regular basis, and then I bring it back in because I could. But so I used Treeline to create a return pull list, and I would give that to the night staff to get them out from behind the counter and have them out in the store, working in the shelves and stuff like that. But also, so I didn't have to do that part myself. But every day after I did that, I would get a stack of books on my desk, and with a note that would say, please don't return these. And so I would write a new note and put it on the back counter saying, please sell these. And that's how it would work. And if maybe they did sell it, I would set them that challenge. And if they couldn't, then obviously that book needed to go away. And if they could, then great. Like, we may not reorder it, but we sold a book, so yay. But I think it's nice to get the staff involved in that way. But yeah, it is hard to, I don't know. You don't have to get dead inside to be able to pull returns, but maybe it helps a little.
Maybe.
So when you were looking at the analytic data for a particular section, and it had three things right together, it had like, this is what percentage of the world has bought this book. I assume it's my local area that it's talking about.
That depends on how you have things set in the market. I'll show you here. So right now this is showing indie trade retailer. So that's going to be the entire country, but you can change that. And we haven't combined California. I don't know that you should. Yeah, I don't know that we should either. It's been discussed, and I think I like it split personally.
I think it's different, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so it would be like whatever you select there is what's going to show here.
Ordered 150 or 15%, and then what's the 247/3.1 mean?
Yeah, so we're looking at ordered is going to be percentage of peers that have it on order versus average units ordered.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh, I can just hover over it, and
just
what I'm looking
the
at.
hover is your friend.
Okay, that helps.
There's a lot of information jammed into small space there.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to know that. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Well, if there is anything that we can do to help you, let us know. Just always, you can email me, or emailing support@abovethetreeline.com goes to me, and then like 12 other people. So that's usually the best way to get something quick.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. This has been great. It's quite an amazing tool for stores.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Thanks for taking the time to join us today, everybody. I know you're all very busy, but thanks for coming today.